There's one more group of pre-Socratics to talk about, a group called the dualists. Now, the dualists argue that people live in two different worlds, or people have two different levels of existence, or two different levels of experience, that people live in two different worlds, or two different levels of existence. One world is the real world. One world is true. The other world is false. It's phony. It's an illusion. So the dualists argue that people have two different types of existences or types of experiences, or people live in two different worlds. One world is the real world. The other world is the false world. After that, now the dualists disagree about everything. But at least they agree on that people have a dual existence, that in some sense they live in two different worlds or two different types of existences. The first of the dualists we're going to be talking about, not the first dualist, but the first one we're going to talk about, is, wrong mouse. A guy named Heraclitus. Let me put the other mouse out of the way. A guy named Heraclitus. Heraclitus argues that in the real world, everything constantly changes. Everything is in flux, he says. Everything constantly changes. That the real physical world is a world of constant change. But that bothers us, to think that we live in a world where things always change, and so we pretend that we live in a world where things stay pretty much the same, when in reality everything around us is constantly changing. If Heraclitus were giving this presentation to you, he might make an argument to you like this. He might say that when you got up this morning and you walked in the bathroom and you looked in the mirror, you were probably relieved to see the same person looking out the mirror at you that looked out the mirror at you yesterday. Wouldn't it be weird if it was somebody else? But Heraclitus says, if that's what you thought when you walked in the mirror and looked in the mirror and said, oh, whew, same person who looked at me yesterday, well, you fooled yourself. Because Heraclitus would say, you're not the same person you were yesterday, not even physically the same person that you were yesterday. I mean, all of us, well, none of us are the same person that we were yesterday, not even physically. All of us have a few more wrinkles today than we had yesterday. Some of us have more gray hair today than we had yesterday. Some of us have less hair today than we had yesterday. Some of us have more hair growing out of stranger places than we had yesterday. Some parts of our body are closer to the ground today than they were yesterday. Some parts of our body ache a little bit more today than they did yesterday. It's called aging. It happens to everybody. And there's nothing you can really do to stop it. There's stuff you can do to slow it down, but there's nothing you can do to stop it. No, it's simply the case that even physically you're not the same today that you were yesterday. If Heraclitus were around today, he might even make an even stronger argument to you. Do you understand that that you're constantly dying, that your body is in a process of dying right now? Little pieces of your body are dying, and they're being sloughed off in all kinds of interesting ways. Some of you already know this, some of you might be hearing it for the first time, but common household dust is primarily made up of dead human skin cells. And animal cells, if you happen to have household pets, if that really makes you feel better about it. But that bothers us. It bothers us to be reminded, excuse me, to be reminded by household dust that we're dying. And so even if we know that household dust is primarily dead human skin cells, even if we know that to be the case, we put it out of our minds. We don't want to think about it because, well, the dust on this computer monitor means something serious. And what it means is that at some point the last little piece of me dies for the last time. And I'd rather not think about that. So I just pretend that the dust kind of evolves on top of my computer monitor, and it really doesn't mean anything. Because what it means is something pretty serious, and something that, I'd really rather think about something else. Heraclitus is maybe best known for a statement, you may have heard it before. He says, you can never step in the same river twice. You can never step in the same river twice. And I guess when you think about it, he's got a point, because the river is constantly changing. The borders of the river are constantly changing. The water's constantly flowing. And Heraclitus goes on from that statement to make the argument that, well, he uses the image of a flowing river to describe the atoms, going back to the materialists, to describe the atoms that are around us in the physical universe, or that in fact my body is made up of, constantly in motion. Around me is teeming chaos of atoms and change, but all that bothers me, so I kind of pretend that the things around me in the physical universe all stay pretty much the same, when in reality everything around me is constantly changing. Heraclitus again argues that in the real world everything constantly changes, but we pretend that we live in a world where things stay pretty much the same. The next dualist we're going to talk about takes the exact opposite perspective, and that's a guy named Zeno. Zeno is going to argue the exact opposite position that Heraclitus argues.